It was almost midnight when the Perkins party made camp, gathering tinder and setting up a campfire in a grove of ash-white oak trees. 4 friends celebrating the birthday of Nick Perkins, the outdoorsman who'd suggested this little adventure. If you could call a trek out to the frigid hinterlands of northeastern Minnesota an adventure, that is. The group of friends didn't think of themselves as the Perkins Party. That was the term the media adopted when the police found what was left in the following days and weeks. Perhaps a knowing allusion to the Donner Party, an infamous group of American pioneers who were snowed in during a cross-country migration and resorted to cannibalism. But the thing that destroyed the Perkins Party wasn't the adverse conditions or each other's fear and hunger. The thing that ended their lives was already at the grove, waiting for them. And it had been for a long time. Perkins and his 3 friends, Ricky, Don, and Harry, sat around the fire, eating handfuls of delicious gorp and drinking coffee. And what better to pass the time in the deep, dark woods than sharing ghost stories? Sometimes trying to keep ourselves afloat here on YouTube can feel a little like being trapped in a cold, dark forest in northeastern Minnesota. If you want to help keep the lights on here at my own little private containment site, subscribe to DrBob, where we're never afraid to take a good long look into the dark. Ricky went first, deciding to go for an old classic. He told the tale of a couple necking in their car on Lover's Lane when they heard a strange noise outside the vehicle. After hearing the breaking news story that there was an escaped maniac with a hook for a hand on the loose, they decided to call it a night and head back home, only for the gal to see a rusty hook hanging from the car door when she got out. Don went second, deciding on another vehicular horror story. A young woman is fueling up at a gas station, only for the attendant to tell her that her credit card was declined and she needs to come inside. She resists at first, before relenting when the clerk threatens to get the police involved. When she enters the store again, the clerk locks the door and tells her that the thing he said about her credit card was a lie. The truth was that he saw a man creep into the back of her car on the CCTV footage. Harry went third, deciding to make his horror a little more domestic in nature. The tale of a babysitter putting the kids to bed and making a call to the parents saying, "Everything's going fine over here, but do you mind if I put a sheet over your clown statue? It's really freaking me out." Only for the parents to reply, "Get the kids out of the house and run. We don't have a clown statue." Perkins, not to be outdone, gave a wry smile and stoked the fire with a stick. He could see the fear settling over his companions. Sure, his friends' stories were fun, but they had one thing in common. They were fake. His own, well, not so much. "You know, it's not an accident that we camped here," Perkins said, trying to seem nonchalant at first, as all good campfire storytellers do. "The old Corhill place burned down not 100 feet from where we're sitting right now." Not a word was shared among his companions. They just gripped themselves to keep the cold out and stared. He had them exactly where he wanted them. "John Corhill was always a shut-in, but when exactly he became a Satanist is anyone's guess," he said. "He grew up in a township near here, but all the other locals were afraid of him. Like there was some inner darkness to the guy that you couldn't see, but you could just feel it radiating off of him if you got too close. When it all got a little too much, he fled the town and ended up here, where he could keep worshipping in private." There was a rustling sound in the trees. Just the wind, surely. The fire was beginning to die now, rendering the grove around them darker by the minute. Perkins continued his story nonetheless. "Corhill built a house out here. We don't know why he picked this grove exactly. Maybe because he could sense that the walls between our world and the next were particularly thin here. Like something could slip through with enough encouragement," Perkins said, perfectly pacing his words. "He made a deal with the devil to live forever, and the devil granted that deal. But in the devil's way, he altered the terms. Corhill's house burned down, and what's left of him is condemned to haunt the grove forever. They say that on dark, cold nights like this, you can still sometimes feel the pricking heat of his burning house on your skin." Another cold breeze blew the second Perkins drew his story to a close, but this breeze carried one of the last few burning embers from the fire over to a nearby tree, an invitation to something old, cruel, and furious. Before any of Perkins's friends could ask a follow-up question, they all felt a tremendous heat against their skin and a blinding light emanating from the clearing in the nearby trees. They all turned at once to see a huge figure, not walking, running out of the terrible dark of the forest. Ricky was the closest to the edge of the campfire, his skin beginning to sear and peel as the figure got closer. The last coherent thought to cross his mind was, "Is that a skeleton?" And he was right. The creature that had emerged in a flash of hot light was a towering, ambulatory human skeleton, wreathed in pure white fire. It grabbed Ricky around the neck and squeezed, its burning hands so hot that it melted through the flesh and were soon gripped around Ricky's spinal column, his entire body consumed in flame, melting like a candle. As the burning skeleton cast Ricky's charred corpse aside, Don, in a blind panic, was trying to unscrew the lid of his canteen, figuring that maybe he could throw some water on this impossible monster to cast it away. Maybe it would work. Who knows? But he wasn't quick on the draw. With Ricky dead, the flaming skeleton seemed to lock on to the nearest target and lunged at Don, pulling him into a flaming bear hug. Harry ran in and tried to pull his friend away, even as doing so set fire to his body as well. The skeleton's grip remained as Don and Harry screamed and melted and charred in its mere presence. Perkins couldn't believe the horror that was unfolding before his eyes. All three of his closest friends in the world were now dead. And he was next. There was clearly no way he could fight this thing. All he could do was get the hell out of here before this incendiary demon got its hands on him. He turned and ran out of the grove, adrenaline carrying him at speeds he never imagined he could run. But it wasn't long before he felt heat on his back. One look over his shoulder confirmed his worst fears. The skeleton was already right behind him, arms extended, burning fingers wrapping around his shoulders. It wrestled Perkins to the ground. It was a small mercy that he at least didn't see what happened to the rest of his body. After all, his eyes melted first. It's difficult to put a number on the sheer quantity of horror movies that make your average camper a little apprehensive about heading out into the wilderness. But while most people fear men with machetes and hockey masks or werewolves with blood dripping from their claws, they're missing the supernatural threat that's much more likely to kill them. SCP-060, codenamed the Infernal Occult Skeleton, an anomaly that's as perplexing as it is deadly. In the early 1900s, there was a spate of concerning reports of arson deep in rural northeastern Minnesota. The disappearance of a pair of police officers sent to investigate had the SCP Foundation heading to a grove of 17 white oak trees and the remains of a house that had seemingly burnt to the ground. Of course, having spoken to the inhabitants of the nearest village, the agents had some idea of what to expect out here in the wilderness. Well, aside from the homicidal fire skeleton itself. A star witness in the case was Christopher Corhill, whose brother, Jonathan, inhabited the home that now lay in a smoldering heap not far from the trees. Jonathan had always been considered a local eccentric, expressing areligious and often downright nihilistic beliefs. He didn't get along with his fellow townsfolk, in some cases, had even been accused of theft and assault by what he had just claimed were paranoid neighbors. Eventually, the enmity between Jonathan and the rest of the town drove him out, constructing his wilderness home to spend his life in the solitude he sought. Christopher wasn't exactly close with his strange brother, but they were still blood, and that was enough of a justification for the two of them to stay in touch. At first, his brother seemed happy to be out there, away from it all, but Christopher couldn't help but notice a change as time went on. More specifically, Jonathan had developed a fascination with Victorian-era occultism, ranting at length about the rare volumes he'd bought at a market and his postal correspondences with certain new friends in the field across the pond. Christopher always knew that his brother was a harmless oddball, but he'd never been into anything like this. Every time Jonathan told him over the phone about his new project, he felt a growing sense of concern. But Jonathan, it seemed, had never been happier. After a call where his brother appeared to simply not be all there, Christopher asked a friend of his on the town police force to perform a wellness check as a favor. It was when this officer went missing that red flags went up for the Foundation. And it was when one of the Foundation agents carelessly dropped a cigarette butt just a little too close to one of the trees that the true nature of the anomaly made itself known. While the entire area and its associated phenomena are referred to as SCP-060, the extremely dangerous and hostile skeleton is referred to as SCP-060-Alpha, or simply Alpha for short. Alpha is over 7 feet tall, the white flame surrounding it capable of burning at 1500 degrees Celsius, and its top speeds have been measured at over 50 miles per hour. The skeleton will manifest any time flames come into contact with one of its seemingly sacred trees, and will then attempt to set fire to anything else in its vicinity, save for the trees themselves. The Foundation has learned the hard way that this very much includes human beings, whom Alpha will attempt to grapple with or strangle, almost immediately burning them to death in the process. Anything or anyone that Alpha burns will result in a new white oak tree sapling beginning to grow in the ashes, which must be torn out manually. Seemingly, Alpha is an intelligent being, and wants to expand its own area of influence by increasing the number of trees that can summon it, if brought into contact with flame. Thankfully, it holds true with Alpha that the fire that burns twice as bright also just so happens to burn half as long, if brought into contact with enough sufficiently fireproof material, or approximately 500 liters of water dispensed by a high-pressure hose. It will seemingly starve out of its own fuel centers and crumble into dust. Sadly, this isn't a permanent condition, only seeming to disincarnate the being until it's next summoned. Whether this entity is some kind of extension of Jonathan Corhill's consciousness or something released by his occult dabblings that ended his life will likely forever remain an open question. What is very much not an open question are the Foundation's containment procedures for keeping this particular dangerous entity under wraps. The Grove has been contained with what is now designated as Satellite Site 66-060, a specially designed greenhouse that keeps SCP-060 in and any potential sources of fire out. Personnel are forbidden from smoking, as well as bringing lighters, matches, tasers, and any other devices that could potentially start fires. But as Smokey Bear has often reminded us, only we can stop forest fires. In a world ravaged by climate change, we need to take a more active approach in making the Grove less susceptible to fire. The trees are watered twice daily, and any dead matter is removed and disposed of to avoid creating highly flammable tinder. In the middle of the containment site, Containment Chamber 060 Alpha-001 boxes in the trees, made with concrete with a 0.2 meter thick asbestos coating, with a series of chimneys to allow for ventilation of heat during containment. The walls are fitted with 24 CO2 projectors evenly spaced at 45-degree angles along the walls. If heat over 200 degrees is detected, all fire suppression systems will activate. Anyone still trapped inside who isn't burned runs the risk of being drowned or suffocated, but that's sadly just the risk the Foundation has to take for the wider world. If the blaze really gets going, containment efforts will need to be redrawn substantially. This anomaly is a poignant reminder that isolation can be a dangerous thing. With the pressures of modern life and the terrible sides of humanity we're often exposed to thanks to the nightmarish panopticon of social media, the idea of leaving it all behind for the pleasing solitude of the woods might seem like an attractive prospect. But the hate that drives you away from humanity can sometimes burn like a fire within. Without the love and support of your fellow human beings, that fire can rage out of control. And the next time someone sees you, the fire might just be the only thing that's left. Want to support my mission here at the DrBob YouTube channel? The best way to do that, while also earning yourself a bunch of fun rewards, is by becoming a junior researcher on the DrBob Patreon. It's the best way to ensure I can keep doing what I do best. Speaking of what I do best, why not continue my exploration into humanoid horrors with SCP-783, There Was a Crooked Man.